should be live in a second. So we are live and really excited. We got some amazing guests today. And this is the first time I'm doing a whiskey and bourbon tasting.
Nice.
And we're going to talk about tech, business, entrepreneurship, fund management. We're going to cover it all. Some of us have been LPs, some of us are also active investors. So I think it'd just be great to talk about all of that stuff. But let me introduce my esteemed guests. So we've got Armand Davis, who's the managing partner of Paragon Group. We have Samara Davis, who's the CEO and founder of Black Bourbon Society and also the founding director of Diversity Distilled. So excited to learn more about that, Samara. And then David Tao is the co-founder and head of brand at Barbend. Two of you have been on my show in the past, so this is kind of like the sequel plus more stuff to talk about. So I just kind of listed your titles, but I'd love for the three of you guys to just double click on your background and your titles, and then we'll go into storytelling further. But Armand, you want to start, and then Samara?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I have had quite a career and quite several non-straight lines to get to where I am. I think a lot of us will kind of share that story. But I've been an entrepreneur, a founder since 2006. Before that, worked in banking, worked at a bulge bracket firm, and eventually decided that it was my path to get into investing and helping underrepresented founders to reach their goals. And one constant along that path, along that journey, has also been my journey with whiskey. And so this is a fantastic forum here for us to tie the two of them together, and we can talk a little bit about that. I started out drinking, Maker's Mark and Jim Beam White Label in college, right? And then went from, when you're working at a bulge bracket investment bank, then you start drinking the Japanese whiskeys. So I was drinking those in the early 2000s and gone and evolved. And now I drink predominantly bourbon, and that's because my love here drinks predominantly bourbon. And so that's why I probably drink that. But we have a collection. I'll let her talk more about our collection and our history in the spirit side of the business. But it really all ties together, and the process is actually very similar.
Great. And Samara?
Well, I'm Samara B. Davis. I'm, like you said, founder of Black Bourbon Society and also co-founder of Diversity Distilled. Armand and I started that organization back in 2020 when we realized that there was more work needed to be done to support Black-owned spirits companies and representation within the spirits industry. But backing up a little bit, Black Bourbon Society is a company that I started 7 years ago when I realized that there wasn't a lot of diversity within the spirit space in general. There weren't a lot of, there definitely wasn't a plethora of marketing strategies and people working within the industry that were dedicating resources and marketing towards consumers of color. And so we started Black Bourbon Society when we saw that need. And, since then we've cultivated an audience of over 30,000 members across the country, predominantly African-American. And we all advocate for more diversity and inclusion in the spirit space, right? So really showing the power of consumerism. We do a lot of education with our audience, really developing the demographic and developing the data behind the demographic that we then go to the brands and consult with them on how to genuinely engage with these diverse audiences. So I met my husband along the journey. So, if there was any one success out of my business, it was falling in love and meeting this guy. And so, it's really interesting. We have always had conversations about how whiskey is tied to income, and it's also tied to educational background and also career. We said that, back in the 90s, business deals always went down on the golf course. Now they're going down at the bar. And that's been part of also our strategy with building our audience and educating our audiences, that really understanding the spirit, being knowledgeable about brands and, their corporate responsibility, even there's the sustainability, all those things, how product is actually created, actually helps them to be more impressive when they are having those conversations with future funders, their bosses, managers, even colleagues, when they're sitting at the bar having those conversations. That just having that extra level of expertise and knowledge really does go a long way in this industry.
Yeah, and I will say, you guys were able to build a relationship and connect with each other romantically in the ecosystem. And I feel like, when it comes to dating, I mean, obviously, I'm married, but I feel like even if you're just trying to find new friends or just kind of significant other, you just find communities where you just enjoy the same, activities and the same interests. That's kind of probably much more natural to meet somebody interesting versus kind of, going to dating events or speed dating, whether it's for VCs or startups or pitch events. If you just naturally just go to a place where you guys have a common interest, you'll never know who you meet. And I mean, David and I have met each other in both parallels. I mean, we met in kind of the investment space, but we ended up just both being interested in the beverages and the whiskey industry too. So I guess to lead that on to David, maybe David, you could just double click on the intro and just your background in the spirit space as well.
I'm David Thomas Tao, born and raised in Kentucky. Actually grew up in Bardstown, which is kind of the center of the American bourbon industry and the American whiskey industry in many ways. It's spread out a bit since the industry's grown and gotten quite a bit broader in a good way, I think, over the last 15 years especially. Live and work in New York. I'm the co-founder, former CEO, now head of brand of Barbend, which is the world's largest dedicated media company for strength and strength sports content. I say former CEO because we were acquired a little over 3 months ago, which has been an exciting process. Still with the brand, kind of an evolving role. So spreading the gospel of what we've built and what our goals are. We have a goal to be the largest fitness site in the world overall within the next 24 months. And I think we'll get there. So I've actually had a few niche consumer facing content exits, Barbend obviously being the most significant by a pretty big degree. And then I kind of have the side career. It started a few years ago. Growing up at Bardstown, you just stay connected with people in whiskey. I actually grew up right off Distillers Row, which is where a lot of the Scion, these big American. And so, people would say, "Oh, have you ever heard of this person or this person, this master distiller here?" It's like, "Oh yeah, I actually went to middle school with them." We do go way back. I do know them, and that kind of evolved into a bit of a side career, doing some investing and consulting in Bev alcohol, and then that evolved into doing a lot of reviews and some writing, and that has grown over the last few years, kind of during and post COVID, into really a second career. So I write for sites like Drink Hacker, Malt Review, Vine Pair, which is the largest spirit and bev alc publication in the world right now. So I do quite a bit of work for them, and maybe a little bit more work in the future, which is a lot of fun. I have started to sit on national tasting panels, which is a big responsibility and also a lot of fun. And if you're ever worried that you can blow out your palate, let me tell you, you can. You definitely can. So I kind of ride this line now between being an investor and consultant in the space, and have done some work with distilleries across the US and even outside of the country, and also doing a lot on the media end. And living in New York has been really cool because as the whiskey industry itself in America has matured, the media representation of it has matured, sometimes in good ways, sometimes not in great ways. So New York being the kind of still the media hub in many ways in the United States, even though I no longer live in Kentucky and I only visit home so often, I can still stay connected to that through media here. So that's what that's my rundown.
Great. Well, to loosen everybody up a little bit, and even the audience too, we're going to talk about a couple bourbons, and we're going to taste them live, bourbon and whiskey. So David, what's this one that you gave me? So for the audience, David gave this to me as a gift maybe like a year and a half ago, and I never opened it. And I realized that I had it. So this says BBC Triple Stave. So can you tell us a little bit about that, David? And I'm going to try it.
Sure. I should clarify that all bourbon is whiskey, not all whiskey is bourbon.
Okay.
It's just an important thing to know. So you are holding a
Understood.
bourbon whiskey in your hand is what you're doing.
And just for full disclosure, I'm still a beginner, you know.
Oh, no. It's great. It's great.
Space.
All what I like to use that term because there are a lot of different types of whiskey, and
Yeah.
we're all enjoying whiskey. It's a really great bridge, right? And one thing I like about the whiskey community is I think it's gotten people have gotten a little bit more open to trying new things. So,
Sure.
you know, when I was growing up, people who were drinking bourbon, they drank bourbon. You wouldn't catch them dead drinking Scotch whiskey, Canadian whiskey, Japanese whiskey. And now there's a lot more cross-pollination, especially among us whiskey nerds, who I think we're all self-identifying on this call. So I think it's really cool, and I think people really like exploring whiskey as opposed to just kind of pigeonholing themselves these days, which I really, really appreciate. So what you're holding is from Bardstown, a sample from Bardstown Bourbon Company. Actually, the bottle it came from is on the shelf behind me. I'm not going to pull it out because then I'd have to recenter my camera. Bardstown Bourbon Company was founded around 2015, I believe. So still a relatively new distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky. They are a pretty major producer right now. They quickly became a top 10 producer as far as whiskey they actually make every year. Pritzker Private Capital currently owns them, and I actually went to middle school, elementary school and middle school, and was in Boy Scouts with the head distiller there, Nick Smith. So the bottle that sample came from, Joel, was signed by Nick Smith because my mom bought it at the distillery. And, you know, I think he was maybe afraid that if he didn't come out and say hi and sign the bottle, that my mom would call his mom, and no one wants that. So what you have is a blend of bourbon whiskeys. And it is finished in a variety of those different components were finished in a variety of additional cask finishes. So they call it triple stave because basically there were 3 different kind of additional stave flavors that these whiskeys were finished in before for different times, different types of casks before it was finally blended together and then bottled. And that actually won a number of awards, made a number of top 10 lists that I really respect for 2022. It was a distillery only release, so you could only get it at the distillery. So not a lot of that floating around out there, and curious what you think. I think the proof on it's like 109, 110. Didn't list that on the sample bottle I gave you.
So, you know, when I did a blind tasting at, you know, your place, what I realized was I like kind of the caramelly, kind of smoother finishes, and this kind of has that. So I kind of noticed that with this, it's pretty smooth, and it kind of has a little bit of a sweet touch to the end of it, which is exactly what I like. So thanks for targeting it perfectly.
Joel, when we met, you said you were a Scotch guy, but I think we might convert you over because some of the things you're saying you really jive with, you know, those are very characteristic fastball down the middle, bourbon notes. So, you know, my goal is over the next few months to see if we can get you over to self-identifying bourbon head, but it'll take some time. We'll get there.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm flexible.
Well, I think the way to kind of do that, especially like to over-identify, is like talk about the type of smooth that you have, right? Because smooth can describe so many different textures. Like velvet is smooth, so it's silk, right? So like you could push your brain. The reason why we love bourbon so much and whiskey so much is that it really is like pushing your imagination to identify and fill in the blanks. So like as you continue to sit there, start asking yourself like, what type of smooth is this? Is this like, does it leave a film on my palate, or you know, like what makes it smooth? Is it the fact that it doesn't burn here, or does it sit warmer, lower in your chest? Like once you start to identify more of that, like that's what really you into.
It has a little bit of like a slight burn on the tip of the tongue, but it's still a good feeling. It's kind of a nice sensation, where there's been other, you know, whiskeys that have kind of this smoky taste, and that burn I don't really like that much, but I like this one because it's kind of like caramelly, but it's like off the tip of your tongue. So I thought that was kind of a unique, I don't know if I'm describing the texture, you know, accurately, if you guys relate to that, but anyways, enough about, you know, me. What do you guys got in your corner there? What are you guys sipping on?
I can go. So yeah, my palate is a little similar to yours, Joel. I like the caramel notes. I like the vanilla notes. I like the honey note. I like red fruit. I like those. So I'm actually drinking Cream of Kentucky Cream of Kentucky Bonded.
Mhm.
Actually, this is a pretty rare find. I found it in a honey hole, which of course it's a honey hole, so I won't reveal its location. A honey hole is a retailer that has really good stuff at fair prices, and when you find it, you don't tell anybody. Just like a bear that finds a hole where he's got honeycombs where he can go and get his honey, and you won't let any other bears know that that's where your honey hole is, right? So that's what a honey hole is for those that are listening. But this is Jim Rutledge, whose name anyone who is a whiskey nerd will really know. He's one of the great distillers of our time, and just a fantastic product. I'll let Samara go into a little bit more detail in terms of what bonded means. I don't know. I just remember it's 100 proof, and it must be in a bonded warehouse. But there's certain requirements that you have to have in order to be considered a bonded bourbon, right? And so they do make a Cream of Kentucky that's not bonded, which is also wonderful. But this one at 100 proof has a lot of character, a lot of texture to it. But it does have that what you talked about, Joe, that creaminess, that caramel, that velvet note to it. It's definitely more velvet than silk, I think, on this one.
Yeah, I mean, can you just unpack the velvet versus silk? So I'm trying to picture that, or just kind of understand that.
So it's really straightforward. It's really simple. It's just you think about it. If you a velvet robe and how that feels to your hands, it feels very soft and smooth, right? But much different from how a silk robe would feel, right?
And it's just really relational. It's really how it makes you feel, because again, nobody's chewing velvet, right? Or nobody's drinking velvet. No one's drinking silk. But it's what comes to mind as you're enjoying this experience. So in the industry, we really rely on olfactory senses, right? So like you kind of talked about Scotch earlier, and maybe even like whiskeys that are smoky, right? So on the Scotch side, especially on the peated side, like you could drink something that tastes like rubber tires. It just has that burnt rubber tire feel and smell, and it just kind of
I've experienced that a few times too. But this one actually I would say is silk. Now that I feel now this time I feel a little bit of my nose too.
So now you're using your senses in order to really experience your whiskey.
The sense of smell is the most powerful sense, and most of your tasting is actually done through your nose. People think it's done through your mouth, but most of it is actually done through your nose.
Right.
So Samara, tell us about your pick.
So my pick is this. This is actually some special juice that hasn't come out on the market yet. It will be released September 1st, but it is our private label. So Armand and I, through our company, Black Bourbon Society, have partnered with World Whiskey Society to create a new private label called Society Squared. And so this is our first release. We plan to do quarterly releases. And so our first release is actually a 10-year wheated bourbon, which means that the primary grain besides corn is wheat. So it's a 10-year wheated bourbon that has been finished in a tequila cask. So this is very special. This is new, like no one really has this yet. We literally just got our labels back from the printers on Friday. So we go to dump our barrel on Monday, and then we'll start to bottle, label, and it'll be ready for public release on September 1st.
That's so exciting. Can you take a moment to just unpack the process of launching a label? I mean, do you have to work with the FDA or which organizations do you have to work with? And then what's the process of just kind of formulating the mixture and kind of coming up with the concept?
So yes, you do have to go through government agencies. So alcohol is very regulated, even more than any other, industry out there. So we had to get a government approval through the TTB and through COLA. So our label had to be approved. It's got to, of course, meet all the prerequisites for spirits and for bourbon in particular. You have to put you've got to put that it's either a Kentucky straight or a straight bourbon of any kind, which means it's over 2 years. You have to put age statements on there if it's under 2 years. So there's a lot that goes into that label because that's how the consumer knows what to purchase. So label is really important. You've got to have your ABV correctly labeled on there as well. This is 108 proof, so it's at 54% ABV. And then, of course, on the back label, you then have to say where it's been produced, where it was distilled, where it was aged, and who's now packaging and selling it, right? So, so all that information has to go on it because you've got to know the source of your whiskey. And that's just historically, again, kind of going back to the Bonded Act, this Bottled and Bond Act, liquid that Armand has, is that like that was put into place before the FDA even existed.
Sure.
So we had to label and we had to identify and document how our whiskey was made before our food was even regulated, right? So it's important to do all of that through the government in order to get the proper approval. For us, we have a really good partner with World Whiskey Society where they had already secured barrels and already had started to age, produce whiskey in casks from around the world. So it was really easy for us to come in and just be able to take over with, monitoring how that bourbon was aging in a second cask, and then being able to decide when it was ripe to pull and when it was ripe to bottle and present into a package. So this is kind of like the easy route of getting into this industry. We kind of mentioned with Bardstown Bourbon Company is that like Bardstown also really allows for new distillers to come in and work with them and being able to get contract whiskey to be able to age it a specific way and be able to get going without having to start from scratch.
So it's almost like an accelerator for people that want to launch their own.
Their own and brand. It's much cheaper. I mean, creating a distillery, is especially on a level of a Bardstown Bourbon Company is going to cost you about $50 million. Sure. And that's a very high bar to get in, especially if you're a new producer or you just really want to have a private label and start to build your brand up. So being able to partner with, existing barrels and being able to, season them in a different cask or blend them in a certain way is a quick way to get into business in this industry.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, it's exciting for you guys to launch a product and then kind of have that be part of the ecosystem as well.
And we've done this. We've done several private releases. This is our first under our own label, but we've done barrel picks and releases with several brands, most notably with Maker's Mark. We did 2 releases with them. Both won international awards. Our first one was a double gold medal at the San Francisco International Spirits Competition. And
the other one was best whiskey,
best North American whiskey. That was whether
for 2021 or something.
For 2021, And so we've done this a few times. We've had great success with it, and so we are simply responding to demand for product for us to release.
That's so exciting, guys. I mean, it's definitely inspiring to see you guys just kind of, like I said, just build the ecosystem and then also have products that, have high demand. So really excited for you guys. And I guess, David, anything to add to what, Armand and Samara, mentioned? And then also, what are you drinking? What's your pick?
Yeah. One thing I'll add is they give really good insight into this phenomenon of NDPs or non-distilling producers. And I think that's really important to arm people with some knowledge of when they look at the industry. And I won't say most, because it really depends on the liquor store. It depends on the particular honey hole you're hunting in, I'll say. But if you go into a liquor store and you look on the shelf, a lot of the bottles you see come from companies that actually don't own distilleries. What they're doing is they're buying whiskey, either aged whiskey or new or under contract new distillate from major large-scale producers, and then they are releasing it under their brand's label. And those are called NDPs, or non-distilling producers. So for example, I just like to give this context for people who might be new to kind of the alcohol industry in the United States, how it works, the economics. The vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of celebrity brands are non-distilling producers,
Right.
meaning they buy distillate from existing distilleries. And that's true in the whiskey space. It's also true internationally in the tequila space.
Especially.
There are a lot of celebrity tequila brands, and not a lot of celebrities own tequila distilleries. So where are they getting the tequila? They're buying it from someone. They might be blending it. They might be doing it, adding a finish to it. They might be doing things with it to make it taste proprietary, and there might be some proprietary processes there. And they're releasing it under their own labels and their own bottles. There's nothing. I want to be clear here. There's nothing wrong with that. Some of my favorite. I have a sourced bottle here. I'm going to share, but I just like to illustrate that some of the finest whiskey, for example, you can find in America is from non-distilling producers. Some of them do really cool things to it. Extra cask finishes, right? Extra age, things like that. Blending, right? There's all art and science to this. But just because you see a whiskey brand, does not necessarily mean they own a $50 million distillery, right? And there is an economy around that. And I'm not making a normative statement that it's good or bad, right? I think there are a ton of positives, but I just like to say that to arm people with the knowledge, right? Because I'm sure Armand and Samara, you're telling people you're releasing a private label, and I'm sure you've had people say, "Oh, where's your distillery? I didn't know you all had, a $50 million distillery with all this startup capital." And you're like, "Whoa, hold your horses on that," right? So I just like to give that as an example. And one bottle that I'm going to share today. So this is a distillery. This is an existing distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky. But I'm actually going to pull out a bottle of liquid that they did not distill, which is kind of an interesting situation. So this is an old Willett family estate single barrel rye. Now, Willett was a company that distilled early in the 20th century, stopped, I believe it's the 70s or 80s, they actually shut down operations and became a non-distilling producer. And they restarted distillery operations around 2012, I think. But they actually kind of rebuilt their name as a luxury brand in American whiskey by sourcing barrels from other places, other distilleries, shipping those to their warehouses and aging them there, and then releasing them often as single barrel selections. So while Willett now releases their own rye, you can find Willett rye. They actually have a 4-year non-single barrel rye that you can find on most liquor stores in the United States. Pretty wide release. This one is an older release from, I think this is like 2012, 2013. So it's a 4-year rye. They hadn't been distilling for 4 years, meaning they bought it from someone else. And actually, if you look on the back, it says distilled in Indiana, bottled by the Willett Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky. And fun little fact about this one, it is a single barrel selection, and you only get so many bottles out of a single barrel, so they number it. So this is actually bottle number 1.
Wow.
Came out of that barrel. So kind of fun. And they actually used to handwrite a lot of the labeling, so you could see which barrel it came from. And this is the old price tag, by the way. You would not find this for this these days. This price is outdated, but I leave the price tag on because it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So this is a rye that was actually distilled at Midwestern Grain Products, or MGP, in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And then it was then shipped down. The barrel was shipped down to Willett, and then they aged it and bottled it in Bardstown, Kentucky, where I grew up. And I think it's really lovely because it being a single barrel, it to me tastes a lot different than other MGP sourced ryes I've had, right? They all have these unique characteristics, and this one I particularly like quite a bit. I cracked it last week, and then I was like, "Oh, this is pretty good stuff." It's a little sweeter than I'm used to some of those rye selections being. So, a little bit of a fun story. And Armand and Samara gave me a really good layup into explaining kind of how some of this whiskey economy works. And I guessed on which bottle to bring, but I'm glad I did. They must have read my mind.
Well, I appreciate that. That was really helpful. I got a question for you guys. So, Ryan Reynolds coined the term fast marketing. Right. And then I think it was also The Rock and also George Clooney. They all had tequila brands. And from my understanding, it's probably the same process, right? They found a distiller, and then they used their brand and their reach to really scale a brand. And I think Ryan also scaled that to, really, really high favorable outcomes. Have you guys started to see, or which are the people that are doing this with the whiskey space? Are you seeing a lot of celebrities kind of start to bring in their own private labels on top of the existing ones? And And what's your reaction to kind of what Ryan Reynolds is doing, his whole fast marketing process?
Yeah. Well, I do want to clarify. Ryan Reynolds did that with the gin.
It was a gin. Sorry. Yeah.
No worries. It's just a little bit different because tequila is a product of Mexico.
Got it.
Legally must be a product of Mexico. So there's a little bit of different of a process for sourcing and importing that, whereas a gin can actually be made domestically in the United States.
Oh, that's good to know. But
So
the Rock had a tequila though, right?
What's that?
Yeah.
I think the Rock had a tequila.
Yeah, The Rock has a tequila that he's a co-owner in. Casamigos, Clooney was a co-owner and a co-founder of.
Yeah.
But yeah, just that one's a little bit different because tequila actually, to be called tequila legally, it has to be produced in Mexico.
Sure.
So you cannot produce tequila in the United States. And in
Got it.
fact, if you actually distill agave in the United States, you can't call it tequila. You have to call it agave spirit, which is not flying off the shelf. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
when it comes to branding.
Yeah.
But there's still a market for it. Agave spirits being produced in the States is a thing. And and in fact, I was at Tales of the Cocktail last week, and I actually met a gentleman from South Africa that has started to distill agave from there. So there's South African agave spirits now. So yes, so there's an opportunity to go out. But to David's point, it's kind of like bourbon can only be made in the United States, right? Outside of that, it can be whiskey. Or if it follows the guidelines of another country's specifications for their whiskey, it can be called that. But, so each part has its own uniqueness to it. To answer the question more, there have been a few celebrities that have tried to come into the whiskey space. Some have been very successful, and then others not so much.
Yeah.
This is not one of those industries where you could make a gin, right? You could just distill a gin, and then you go straight to bottling, and you can do the product. Same with tequila, especially if it's a Blanco, right? You can distill that agave spirit and then go straight to bottling. If you are doing an añejo and a reposado, of course, those has to age a little bit. But for bourbon and for American whiskey in particular, like you have to wait. It's a waiting game, right? And oftentimes, a lot of celebrities that come into this space actually don't have a palate for it. Yeah. So they're just sourcing. They're looking at, and I have to say that I consult with some of these brands. So I want to be very, very kind in a way of saying this. But if celebrities are coming into the spirit space, it would behoove them to consult with experts in the space to really spend and invest in good quality sourcing of barrels, right? So getting your product from MGP, but not just getting the cheapest barrel you can find, but actually presenting a quality product that has been aged for a certain amount of years. And a lot of celebrities just don't want to take those extra steps to really make impactful impact on this industry. Sure. There are things like Bob Dylan has partnered with. He was one of Dave Pickerel, who was another great master distiller and also just a really great mentor in the whiskey industry. He partnered with Dave Pickerel before he passed to create Heaven's Door, and I believe Blackened was with Metallica. And they also were working with Dave Pickerel before he passed to create their label. So, like, if you've aligned yourself with the best of this industry, and again, consulted with people like us, people like David, really great experts that have great palates, then celebrities will do well. But a lot come in just looking for that cheap, that cheap break, kind of what's getting in tequila right now, because tequila is really oversaturated with celebrities. Such an in and out situation. But whiskey is not one of those things that you can do that with.
That's helpful. Because that's what I was wondering. Like, I haven't seen too many people come out with it. So thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, I mean they have, but no.
Armand,
you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say you can't release a new bourbon like you would release a new cologne, right? It's not the same. Like there really is. First of all, whiskey in particular, I think is really a culinary experience. It's not vodka shots, right? And so when you literally have to build a bourbon almost in the same way we talk about, you build a business, right? And so there's levels to it. As we said, there's levels to this, right? And so it's important that if you are a celebrity or someone of note and you're interested in getting into the business, that you do take the time to learn, or at least to reach out to someone who is an expert and understand the process of actually building good juice, because it's not just slapping an attractive label and doing a commercial and flying it off the shelf. It may do that initially, but if it doesn't taste good, right?
They will not buy it again.
They won't buy it again.
Sure.
Yeah. And I do want to clarify, I think something that's really cool. One brand, I'm so glad you all mentioned Blackened, which Metallica is very much a driving force behind. But they've done a lot of smart things, right? They partnered with Dave Pickerel, who was, RIP, who is truly a legend in the space. Rob Dietrich, who's their current master distiller and master blender, is doing a lot of really fun things, right? They're doing a lot of really cool collaborations. And so that's a brand personally, when people say, well, you probably hate all celebrity brands. I'm like, actually, no, I don't actually. A lot of what Blackened's put out recently, especially their Masters of Whiskey selection, Master of Puppets, Masters of Whiskey, there's like a Metallica tie in there.
Yeah.
I think some of it's phenomenal stuff, right? So, I'm not a hater, like as much as some of my friends think. But I don't know, it's kind of fun to be called a hater sometimes. So maybe that's not so bad.
I think, Joel, as you start to develop your palate and come more into the whiskey space, we really, as we start to nerd out and start talking about the science behind it and the history behind it. And, again, David and I, we judge competitions and we taste a lot of products all the time. You start to just, we are very protective of our industry.
And absolutely.
So if people come into it, they've got to come at such a high bar in order to gain our respect. It just be, this person has that, let's just buy it. No, it's really, wait, you're here, but do you really care? Do you know what you're drinking? Do you know where it's from? We really need to understand that if a celebrity comes into this space with a true investment and the level of commitment to this industry as we have.
Yeah. So there's go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a question actually. Anil asked a question in the private chat, and I was wondering if we might be able to talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So the question is the difference. What are some of the biggest differences with the whiskey industry versus the wine industry?
One thing, and I want to start and then toss it over, but one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is that legally, wine and beer are treated very differently than hard alcohol, than liquor, right? There are very different legal regulations. And that's both at the federal level and it's at the state level. Yeah. And what that means is you have multiple levels, and sometimes actually at the municipal level too. So you have all these different layers of complication. And the wine industry, for example, regulations around home brewing beer, right? Very different than home distilling, where in the vast majority of places in the United States, that is super, super illegal, right? To run a still at home without a license. But you can home brew beer, or you can make wine in your basement, right? In a lot of places. And so they're legally very different categories, and they're regulated differently at the federal level and at the state level. And that is a primary difference. Now, the distillation process also adds a layer. Everything starts with fermentation, right? All this, every alcohol we drink starts with fungus, breaking down starch into sugar and sugar into alcohol in some capacity, right? That's how it all starts. Distillation is another process on top of that to refine and draw a higher concentration of alcohols out of that initial fermentation process. And then legally you get very, very different regulations. And so it's almost like they're not even in the same category. It's all bev alcohol and there's some commonality, but it's almost like comparing cars to computers in certain instances, because the regulation is so massively different in some places.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's really helpful.
Yeah, just kind of adding on top of that, there are, again, kind of going back to the state level, right? So there's places where you can buy beer and wine, like in Walmart, right? But there's also states where you can't buy alcohol other than a state store.
Mhm.
So like it's state regulated as well. So there is a difference. Again, I'm not quite sure, but I believe the 3-tier system is also like kind of specific to the alcohol industry over at beer and wine as well.
The liquor,
Distilleries can't sell, whereas, when you're in Napa, you can buy bottles directly out of the gift shop and it comes from the winery itself. Distilleries are able to sell to sell alcohol in Kentucky, but they have to buy their product back from the distributor in order to do so. Like they have to have a license. So there's so many different regulations when it comes to that. And then I believe it's even down to the profit margins on that. The distilleries are only able to sell their product to a distributor at a certain rate. Like from there, the distributor can sell whatever they want to sell to the retailer, and the distillery gets none of that in return. So it's like this middleman process that happens. And of course, the retailer, David showed this lovely bottle of Willet at MSRP. I don't know where he found that from, but typically Willet in the shelf, even at a Honey Hole, will be 3 times the price. Well, the retailer gets that price. The distiller still gets the same product that price that they sold it to the distributor at. So it's like these siloed buckets of how to do business revenue as well. And it's all about aging. Wine is something that you can produce in and out, seasonal, varietal, and it may sit for 2 years at max, but then you can just go ahead and continue to yield your crop, and you can continue to sell. Again, with whiskey, especially really good whiskey, you distill it and you've got to let it sit for 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, and you got to pay taxes on it while it does it.
Well, and add to that the fundamental, the source of it is also significant. Wine primarily comes from grapes, but from fruit, right? When you think about, particularly with whiskey, it comes from grain. It comes from corn, wheat, barley, right? It comes from different grains. So even the source of where it comes from is significant in terms of how it's treated and how it's viewed.
Yeah, sure. And quick just rule of thumb that I think is really useful for people, especially if you're new to kind of understanding some of this. So you can distill a lot of stuff, right? Everything that's distilled is not necessarily whiskey. Whiskey is liquor distilled from grain, from fermented grain. Brandy is liquor distilled from fruit. So you can have an apple brandy, you can have a grape brandy, you can have a pear brandy, apricot brandy, personal favorite of mine, right? So I just like to, and then tequila is something distilled from agave, as is mezcal. Like, so there are all these different types of liquor, and they're often defined, like what Armand was saying, by where they come from. What was the base product that was fermented? What is the category of that product? That will determine what the ultimate distillate is called.
Right.
Yeah, that's helpful. Well, that was really an amazing overview. I know we got 5 minutes left, or 4 minutes now. So, one thing I wanted to leave the audience with, along with just understanding whiskey as a business, I'd love to just hear some business lessons that you've learned, because we're always learning, right? So probably in the last quarter or just last couple months, like, launching a business or just investing, either of the two, what's kind of a huge key lesson that you want to just share with us?
I'll start. I would say for me, the parallel is between investing and distilling, for example, is extraordinarily similar, because it requires precision and patience. Precision and patience.
Sure.
And so it's important that whether you're making a decision on a company that you want to invest in, or even if you're operating a company and you're making decisions on where you want to invest your working capital, it's important to be precise and understanding what it is that you're seeking, right? And so, because if not, then you end up with kind of like throwing something up against the wall to see what sticks, and that never works well for whiskey, and it won't work well for you and your business either. And so, I think that that's something that's extremely important. And then I also want to take a second and say, if you are a novice, or if you are interested, or you are an expert in whiskey and bourbon and you want to learn some more, we invite you to come to Louisville Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
We are doing our bourbon boulet that weekend, and we will have private tastings, distillery tours, private dinners. It will be a whole experience centered around love and interest of bourbon. And so more information on that, you can go to bourbonboulet.com. And we really think that it would be an enjoyable experience. So we invite anybody to that experience.
So I did not put him up to that shameless plug, but thank you, husband.
No worries. I did better. I dropped in some of the URLs, and we'll share the invites to those as a follow up too. So appreciate you letting us know about that.
Yeah.
And we invite both of you, Joel and David, to join us as well in Louisville. But kind of going back to your question, it really is the more you know, the better off you'll be, right?
Yeah.
Like this is not something to rush into. This is not something that you're going to make a quick buck, just like with business. Like it's not as turnkey as we would like to be. Like, oh, I have a business now, I'm a millionaire. That does not work in the whiskey industry at all. And in fact, one of the questions that's in the queue is, from an investment and profitability point view, what can you share? And again, kind of going back to the way that we are now entering into the space using, source barrels that we're aging and then putting our label onto. That's the best, quickest investment that you can get, even though it still requires a palate. It requires an understanding of where you're sourcing from and all of that stuff in order to make great business decisions with the whiskey that you present. But that is the best way to get in now and see a profit in this lifetime. Yeah. If you're going to, invest in a $50 million distillery and you're going to pull money together, unless you're going to turn around and sell it to a major conglomerate, then and you're waiting for that itself to pay off that $50 million, it's going to take 2 to 3 generations in order to do that. Yeah. And that's just the reality of it. We have to look at some of these labels, like you had a bottle of Four Roses, which if you really look at their profitability standpoint, they haven't really reached that level yet, right? They're kind of working underneath some larger the entire time. But somebody like a Jim Beam, somebody like a Maker's Mark, someone that's been in pre-prohibition, they are just now really starting to really enjoy the fruits of their labor. They're 3 and 4 generations deep. So again, coming into this industry, it's really knowing like, okay, am I doing this for a legacy, or am I doing this to just really try to get in and make a business now, build a brand, build a marketing label that really resonates with consumers? And if that's the case, then sourcing and really having a good brand story is the way to do that.
Yep. Yeah. And David had to hop, but him and I had like an hour and a half session on his business. So I'll get some comments from him too to drop in here. But hey, I know we're at time. Thanks so much for the both of you and David and everybody for tuning in. This was a huge learning experience for me, and excited to learn more and be more involved in the community. And thanks for all that you guys do, Armand and Samara, for the community as well.
Thank you. Come to Louisville. We'll teach you how to drink. We'll look at all.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's on my list. I'll try to be out there soon.
All right. Thanks, Joel.
Take care. Bye, guys. Bye.
Okay.
All right.